Well, thanks so much for having me. I apologize in advance. I'm a little froggy. Nothing's communicable anymore, but I am kind of getting over something here, so bear with me. And hopefully it won't affect any of the recording or anything, but you'll see me taking a sip pretty often here just to keep things working. So I was in the Army, active duty for 13 years, and I finished up in the Ranger Regiment here at the 2nd Ranger Battalion at JBLM. And the biggest difference between, I worked at every level that up to a major can work at, which just means that, well, you guys are all veterans, right? Is that how this works? No, okay. Well, the way that, basically, for me to do my job any further in the Army, I would have had to become a pure administrator and not a service provider anymore. So this talk here, hopefully you'll enjoy from me today, is about a lot of these talks that I've been to here. Tom's thing has been kind of product driven, and this is a different one for me because I'm a service offering, right? Like I offer physical therapy, strength and conditioning, and prosthetic training services, which is a pretty different. It's not the off-the-shelf business model you can pick up, at the bookstore or online. It seems more complex to me, but that might be because I'm not very good at it. We'll see how it goes. It's worked for me, but it's not quite the same. It's not something that's on Shark Tank for the most part. So the biggest difference between the military system and being like an entrepreneur or in business in the civilian world, at least as far as I can tell, is that there isn't really a system. So the military is built on turnover, plug and play. Everyone has to be replaceable. Everyone has to be, because they're only going to be in a job for at most, 24 months for the most part in most positions. So like the first 6 months of that job is reading the person before you's continuity book is what we call them. And like it was basically just a huge binder, a literal book of all the different things that the job entailed. And then you maybe have, if you're lucky, you have 9 to 12 months where you're anything that could be called good at the job. And then you spend the last 6 months kind of updating the continuity book for the next person coming over. So there's this constant revolving door, but it's very much in a system. Everyone occupies a very distinct duty description. You have very distinct responsibilities, and the whole place functions that way. And so it's a feed forward, and it's not like that at all, once you leave. As a matter of fact, at least in my experience, so what I work in right now is specialty orthotic and prosthetic training for essentially adaptive athletes. And so we have people, we're an international center, so one of the reasons I came straight from work today and wore my best shorts and hoodie is because we have people coming in from the UK, Poland, Australia, China. I mean, you name it, there are people coming over to get some of these specialty items. And so there's the product, but what I'm offering is the training, which means that most of the time you would get some of these specialty items, there would not be a lot of training to them. But because they're such high-end products and because it's not intuitive to use them, especially when you're coming from one way of moving and then trying to get to a better and more excellent way of moving, that's just as different as it was when you took a step back with your injury. So it's different on the plus side, but it's still the same magnitude of difference. And so bigger than any other prosthetic company in the world that we're aware of, we're doing some really in-depth training with folks. And so that's my main service offering, is to take my degree in physical therapy and my experience in strength and conditioning and kind of put those together. So because I mention all that because we're a very special center, there's probably even less of a system. It's even more of a, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, but easy way to say it is it's even more of a cult of personality. It's very much what my colleague and I, the clinic director and I, do on a daily basis and how we offer it. And if either one of us is gone, like I am now, things come to a grinding halt. And there isn't a lot of overlap. We have some folks that can come and help us, but there's really nobody else that can do what he does exactly the way he does it. And there's really, unfortunately, and I wish that wasn't true because of where I come from in the Army, there's no one else that can do my job exactly the way that I do it. And so that is very different. And the biggest difference that might translate to you all would be how to communicate that. Like how, when someone is when someone's essentially like a neophyte, very novice and they're looking for your services or looking for you in the industry, they don't know. We used to say, like, if you're trying to describe a duckbill platypus to someone who's never heard of a duckbill platypus, they're going to get it wrong every time. Or it's that mouse and the elephant kind of thing. If you're only seeing like one part, if you're right up next to the elephant and you're only seeing one part of it, you might say, oh, this is a snake because you're only right by the trunk. Or you might say this is a big, huge tree because you're right by one of the legs. Or this is a horse because you're by the tail. And so these specialty items, the more specialized and the less sort of in the public consciousness your service is, the more you have to invest in a pretty high education piece to it. And that's also very different than the way I practiced as an Army officer and also as an Army clinician. Because in something that's that big of a company, and I think this would translate to large companies on the civilian side too, although I have little experience with that. I would imagine it's similar where you don't really have to educate everyone because the company is so big and so known, right? Like it's a known quantity, or because the product is so familiar and it's just in the public consciousness, you're just offering a different spin on a product that the world is familiar with. Well, when you're at the specialty end of services, it's not like that at all. People have no idea what to expect. Most of the time, they're very scared. They're very skeptical, because the other thing that comes with specialty services is usually a high price tag. So let me just speak to that for a second. So one of the things I didn't learn from the Army was how to like put my arms around someone who didn't understand the system, or someone who didn't understand the specialty situation they're walking into. They just knew it was special, and that's really all they knew. They knew they'd heard good things, and that's why they're there. But they don't know how to describe the elephant in total. They only know this one part that they liked. Oh, I liked the snake part. Oh, I liked the tree trunk part. I liked the horsetail part. And that's the part I want to see. And then when you you're like, oh, well, here's the whole elephant. And they're like, oh no, I thought it was a tail. I thought it was this horse. I didn't know it was this elephant. And that can make it a little bit difficult, because everybody comes in with some kind of expectations, and you are simultaneously fulfilling their wildest dreams and crushing their wildest dreams at the same time. Yes, sir.
Jared, can I just give the table a little bit of context? So Jared works with a lot of people who have experienced, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, major musculoskeletal injuries, or maybe birth, issues.
Congenital or neuromusculoskeletal.
Yeah, and so external prosthetics and blast injuries, all types of things, just to give you guys a context. So you're talking about people with a fair amount of trauma.
Yeah, so I had a lady today who brought her daughter, and the lady, when I first met her, this is a year down the line. So I met this lady and her daughter a year ago, and we fit them for her devices. So just to draw a line under what Travis just said, thank you for doing that. And I have 100 of these, so if you guys are just morbidly curious about how people get hurt, I'll give you nightmares. The lady I saw today, she first came. I'm gonna kind of set it up here for you. So they come and see me, and the lady is very timid, and her daughter is not apparently, at least to a very quick look over there, she doesn't look horribly disfigured or injured or anything like that, and so you don't really know. But the lady just is so meek and so kind of almost apologetic in her demeanor, and you're wondering what happened there. And so my colleague Ryan is telling me, he's like, oh, well, here, let me come tell you what happened. The girl's 17 now, and she's doing great. She's an opera singer in her high school. Her body doesn't work quite the way she wants it to, and she's having some issues with that. But she's a young, healthy, vibrant lady. When she was 2, they lived on a golf course. They lived in an annex to the golf course. Her mom was one of the greenskeepers. She ran out in front of one of those big standing riding mowers. And her mother, it was so bad, her mother thought she had just vaporized her. She did not think her daughter existed in any sort of sense anymore. What actually happened was she's caught up in all the blades, 2-year-old, okay? Caught up in all the blades, all kinds of trauma. Now we're seeing her 15 years later. And so, and you're just so malleable at that age that it can heal to the point where unless you see a move or look at specific sites, it doesn't stand out. And so we fit this person who is essentially, it's an injury, but it might as well have been congenital because she's had it her entire life for the most part, at least since she's been able to move. So for every story like that, and so you can just imagine her mother's anxiety. Her mother is apprehension. Her sort of worry that, we're going to ask them to spend like all this money and all this time and stay with us for like 2 weeks and take time away from their life. And what's that going to feel like? Well, that's not maybe a different investment than any sort of high-end product or service. And even, it doesn't really matter. It just matters if it's different or if it's a significant investment for that client or for that person. So I don't ever think it's wrong to do this high education piece. But as Travis pointed out, I'm working in an industry where that is like going to be the essence of success or failure. Because if they have one set of expectations and we don't migrate that into what the realities are, then that person is going to, no matter how good they could have been, they will probably have a poor or at least a suboptimal experience. So anyhow, I guess you got to run the numbers when you run a different business. For us, it was worth it to take it out of a portion of the product instead of billing insurance or asking for or offering it as as like an add-on or a la carte item. This is something that's so central to what we do, and even interfacing and talking with them kind of in the same way I'm talking with you guys is so central to the success of this delivered product that it's definitely worth spending the time. Yes, sir.
Do you ever get emotionally attached to the story and say, we've got to help this person and we don't care about what the cost is? I mean, there's a price for that, I understand, but emotionally you get involved with this story, right? And you come in and you're almost like God if you go because you're looking for a healer, correct?
Mm-hmm. I'm not on the end of that decision, but it does get made where we do some work pro bono. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that just comes out of like either out of the clinic director's pocket essentially, or it's extra time. That definitely happens. But when you work and I don't know how specific to my own situation you want me to go in this talk. I'm happy to get as specific as you want. I'll just go this far right now and then wait for prompts from you guys for more. But if you did that with every story is like that. So it's not as if you need to be callous or disinterested, but you have to set limits or you can't survive. There's even a thing called compassion fatigue. Like if you are so empathetic and so invested in each patient, they are having a lifetime of trouble. And so it would be very easy for you to become a central figure in their life for like the rest of their life. And it's a weird position to be able to sort of like, oh, I think I like that person a little more. They want me to be at their son's, graduation, and this person wants me to. So you just can't, because that's not a good place to be. Like no one, I don't know if I'm hitting this thing, but no one should be making choices like that, I don't think, because it turns into something else. So you sort of have to like maintain some distance without, so I just throw everything I can into the interaction that day. And I try not to get wrapped into the larger context of the story. Not because I'm not interested or because I don't care, but because I wouldn't know where to draw the line cleanly.
I can imagine, emotionally you're kind of drained towards the end of the day.
You can be. Luckily, our intervention is, I don't want to throw numbers out, but it's got a pretty high success rate, like in the 90s. And so most of the time, it is draining in a positive way. Like I'm tired, but happy. You have to manage that energy too. So I don't know if that's something you want me to go into as far as entrepreneurship and the energy expenditure and how you regulate. But that's been a whole learning curve for me too. Because another thing that I'm sure you guys know you don't get is you really don't get any PTO, right? Like if you don't work, you don't get paid. So that's a problem. And so you have to really do some real economic decisions about and know yourself and some introspection. I'm sure Travis has talked about this. To know like how much time you should take, because you've got to take it or it blunts your results, and then you're not making money on that end of it. So, or delivering care in the way that the way that your principles dictate. So, you kind of have to. It feels like you're losing money, but you're really not. But in the moment, as I'm like not going, and I'm looking at, whenever I have a friend of mine take over for me and do this specialty service for like a week, like I just have been on reserve duty. I look at the schedule and I'm like looking at dollar signs I could have had, right? Like I'm looking at how many people went in that day and I'm like, damn, that was a good week. I could have had a lot of money there that week. And now I'm stuck doing my reserve thing. So it's all, you just gotta, that's totally, in the final analysis, it's totally worth it, but it doesn't feel as easy as just going to your boss and be like, I need some vacation days, or like, I'm gonna take off, and knowing you're gonna get paid, or like when we were in special operations and you're getting like 2 long weekends a month, so you don't even have to take it out of your, like, there's nothing of that. This is like, we work every day, and my partner is like a workaholic, and so we're just, I basically gotta like, sorry, I gotta take more time. So there's a differential there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. Were there any other questions before I like continue spieling? And I don't need to continue spieling. I could just have a conversation with you too.
How do you like maintain that balance with your partner if he's all about the work and you're about the work, but you're more about like being yourself as well, like, and being like healthy in yourself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just have to be very guarded about it. Here's a really simple explanation. He doesn't stop to eat, like at all. Like he eats, but he just picks at stuff all day. Now, this can't be a long-term healthy thing to do. But I did that for about 2 years with him, where I would just like really, I would eat as I was like training people. Well, you don't digest when you do that, because all your blood is going to your skeletal muscles. And so I started to have digestive issues. And like, so I guess one ugly answer, but clear answer to your question is, do it their way until you run into a wall and it's obvious to everybody you can't keep it up. Because he needs you too. Like you're on, the thing to remember in that moment is you're on the team, and that you're not still in some kind of provisional status. So like once you've proven your worth and made yourself like carved out kind of a niche for yourself, I think it's a little easier to kind of make what might seem like demands in one context, but you're just like, I'll be like, buddy, you are aware that people eat lunch and they sit while they do it, right? Like, here's this list of test results why like I should be one of those people. But yeah, no, it's contentious sometimes, it's just, he's very one way, and I was like that while I was in the military. That's a very productive thing to do in the military, is to ignore the rest of your life. That will make you rise in rank quickly. But that will not often give you a full career. So you'll have sort of this quick rise and then a flame out, and hopefully the flame out is more you deciding to flame out, which was kind of me. It was like, look, I don't need to stay on this train in this way because it'll eat me alive. I need to go ahead and realize I've done that. I've checked that block. I don't need to work like this. Like apparently my partner has not checked that block yet. Fortunately for me, because I get to ride along. And so I can maybe transition this answer into, unless you have more to your question, into one thing you can do as a service provider that I found that's different is you partner. I mean, one of the very first things I did, and one of the reasons Travis and I know each other so well is I went shopping for a place to work as a service provider, and I found Tacoma Strength. So I went, as soon as I got out, I knew what my skill set was, I knew what I could do, and I just looked at all the gyms in the area, because one thing that's missing in most gyms is somebody that knows how to deal with anything that doesn't work perfectly and kind of build it back up or prevent injury. And I was like, well, let me just find the folks that look most open to that. And now I'm not worried about overhead. I'm not worried about, rent, brick and mortar, that type of thing. I'm just showing up, providing services in an established facility. Sir?
While you were in the Army, Jared, did you know that you were going to be an entrepreneur? Or did you just riding the wave and figure, okay, I'm on this ride for a little bit and figure out after that?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't say I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I knew how I wanted to practice. Like I knew I wanted to practice and offer my services in a certain way, a way that I felt like gave the most to the people I'm serving, but also the most satisfaction to me to keep it up over time. And it had to be that way, because that didn't really, there aren't businesses doing that. So it necessitated entrepreneurship. So I hope that's a fair answer to your question. It isn't something I sought. Like I did not want to start a business per se. It seemed like a lot of overhead. It seemed like a lot of, like I have, and actually coming to Griff's talk from Combat Flip Flops a couple of years ago, I was considering at that time doing an MBA, and he's like, well, you can find people for that. like if you're good at one thing, don't try to be two different people. Like do your thing that you're good at, and find people that are good at that other thing that you're not, and like let that happen. And I took that to heart. Tom said the same thing to me, so I won't give it all to Griff. Tom and I talked about it afterwards too. And so I ended up getting into a PhD program instead. And that has been a vehicle for essentially developing research to make this very specialized service offering that we're doing, to underpin it. Like the way you sell these things is, in medical community anyways, less about sales and more about research. There's sales too, but people are like, yeah, that seems like real. That's kind of hinky. You're just selling me something. Tell me something substantive, objective that I can sink my statistical data teeth into. And so I got into this PhD as a structured vehicle to develop more of a research underpinning for the way we're offering what we're doing, so that it becomes sustainable. So what I've tried to do is, even though I'm in this specialty thing, and I told you the biggest thing I didn't learn in the military was how to work outside of a system, although people will tell you like everyone in the military is working outside that system in some way, but but living on the outside is different. So as I've worked outside the system, I want some system in there. I don't want it to be completely fly by the seat of my own pants every day, and whether I show up or not is success or failure, or whether my partner breaks his hand and now I'm screwed, I don't have a job anymore, or who knows what. Any number of weird things come up. So it's been important to come up with ways of systematizing some of what I do. Sir?
How do you mitigate that risk, I guess? Like, do you guys do videos and that kind of stuff? So in case one of you guys are absent, or do you break your arm?
Yeah, no, I worry about it all the time. And that very thing, like if he cannot do the specialty technique things he does as a prosthetist, there's literally no one else in the world that can do it. So it's like, shit. No, what do I do to mitigate that? I mean, I can't really, look for something else, really, because I think, and this may not be the best answer, but the answer I've arrived at is, once you get to, like, once you're in such a corner, or such like a niche, such a small community of practice, you just do something different. So the other reason to do a PhD rather than an MBA was it lets me teach. Because what else so what I always say is, like, why am I doing this PhD? Well, number one, it's a vehicle for something we need to do anyway. So it's combining efforts, so it's not an extra effort as much. And then the second reason is, if this ever dries up, I got a side hustle. Like I can go, and you can start teaching as an adjunct or as an associate professor before you're ever hired as tenured faculty somewhere. So I can kind of dabble and keep myself kind of on the market as a teacher. I love teaching. I love talking like this. I almost love talking like this more when I can dress like this, because one is clearly I'm trying to shine you on and then you're hoping for content. I'm not trying to shine you on with this getup. Like, there is no sort of professionalism being communicated here. So and I apologize for that, but we do that at work on purpose too. So part of me not dressing up for work, part of me looking like a sweaty gym rat at work, is that's what those people are coming to do. It is going to be largely on them to do, going forward, to do the right things and recondition their bodies and learn to use this thing. It is going to be on them. It is not, I'm not some guru hander out of wisdom. I'm a partner. And so they show up and work with me. And that's how teaching should be too. And that's how most of the teaching curricula that we're learning about and being taught as would-be professors is that same way too. You're not, what do they say? You're not the poet on the pulpit anymore. And then there's some other kind of sexy turn of phrase for, now you're just like in the trenches with everybody else. And I like the feeling that this sort of thing communicates, although I know it is a little bit against the grain. Dressing like these guys did is much better. So.
What's your clinic structure? Just you and your partner, or you have systems or admin?
No, it's just me. As far as the clinic, we're the two providers. He's the hardware guy, I'm the software guy. That's how we think about it. Like, he makes the things that change that body in segments, and I change the software so they can use it. So he updates the OS, and I update the phone, or vice versa. I update the OS, he updates the phone. As far as assistance, he has a lot of technicians for production, because each device we make is at least 40 man-hours long. Most of them are more than that. And then there's a lot of tweaking after the thing is generated to optimize it for that person, because you can't know everything from a static mold. And so he has lots of technicians to help, about 5 or 6 technicians to help him with that. And then there's a 3-person administrative front and back office type staff. But for the actual provision of services, it's just the 2 of us.
What were some like traits? I know every situation is different, but what were some traits that made him like the right partner for you?
He asked me, which was important. That was a trait. So I was available. That was another good trait. So why was he the right partner for me? Well, we had history. So he had taken care of a couple of my injured Rangers. And I went down to learn about what was involved in helping these guys use these weird devices they showed back up with. Honestly, for me, one of the reasons I needed to leave the military is I was at the point where they really wanted me to be more and more and more of a leader. I had done a leadership job when I first got in as a lieutenant and a young captain. And then I went to grad school and I had to take a demotion to do that. As a matter of fact, it's a very fancy thing. Were you military? So we did a demotion ceremony and we did it out by the dumpsters at the back of the schoolhouse. And I invited everybody to come up and say something that I did stupid. And then, tear my rank off and stamp on it. And anyway, so like the exact opposite of a promotion ceremony. And so I had to restart my clock in a way and kind of climb back up. And so I guess, sorry, I got like lost in my thoughts about that. But as you go back there, so I had to take a step back and kind of restart again. And then remind me where we were going with that.
So the traits you said.
Right. So I knew I didn't want to be on leadership track anymore. And he was very much like he has a very specific idea of how he wants this whole thing to go. And I'm like, great. So I'd rather be first mate than ship's captain any day, honestly. Like I think I'm an okay leader. I've been told so by my subordinates and by my superiors, more than okay on some occasions, but it takes a lot. And so I'm a much better partner than I am a leader. So this was a guy that I knew was gonna take. I mean, he just couldn't let go of the lead. Honestly, it was like this is his way of doing it. It's very much his project, and I was just lucky enough that he had confidence in my skills to be a good second. So those were like the main things. Other than that, I mean, some of it isn't particular to him, but being involved in an industry that sort of begets the kinds of social and professional experiences that you want, because you're going to spend a lot of your time there. And so working with someone in an industry and in a situation that was going to feel, I never wanted to come home at the end of the day, as I'm transitioning careers, I never wanted to come home at the end of the day like my dad did, my dad did very well in business, where he needed time to switch gears to being like a human, where he needed time to calm down, to process through all the crap he did that day and switch into dad mode. I didn't want that for me. I love my dad, and he was an excellent father, but I definitely didn't like that part. And so I want that for my spouse too, for my partner, my friends. Like I want to come home and be like excited as soon as I walk in the door and ready to rock. I don't want to come home like, oh man, today was rough. So some selection criteria there was I needed somebody in an industry and someone who also had. So he wants everyone in the business to be balanced, even though he is very on the extreme of workaholism. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
I was really amazed when you said that you'd rather be a first mate as opposed to a captain.
Oh yeah, any day.
How? I mean, when you were in the army and all that, I mean, ego is your ego if you're an officer, right? You got the pinnacle of becoming a colonel.
That's BS.
You know.
I don't believe that stuff at all.
No.
No, but keep going.
Who you are.
Yeah.
when did that point come and said, you know what, I'm okay being number two?
Yeah, I mean, probably going to the nth degree on trying to be number one. You know, you realize what it costs. And I don't think some people realize that till they're done. You know, I was lucky enough to realize it somewhere in progress and be like, yeah, I'm not doing this. I mean, deployment helped. You know, war helps. A lot of things come clear. Some things get muddy, but some things get clear. And one thing that gets clear is like how tenuous, you know, like here we are meeting, you know, and I'm like not worried about what's going on outside. That's tenuous. You know, that could change in a moment. I'm not living as if it will. I'm living as if it's going to be like this all forever, which is nice. I like it. But going off to war like lets you know how thin that veneer is, and so it kind of gave me an awareness of timelines. So that was the beginning of it, was to realize like, oh, I mean, this, first of all, this could change at any moment, you know. So let's make it good in every moment as much as that's possible to do. So that was the beginning, and then realizing what it was costing folks at levels above me to perform at the level they were, and how, you know, how much of an outlier someone had to be to have a happy family and an uncomplicated marriage, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the numbers weren't right. You know, I'm like, look, I don't have a lot of time, but you want me to defer all of this day-to-day balance for this, you know, this long-term target of maybe someday when I'm a general, I'll be able to make all the calls. You know, like I think the misleading thing that young military folks kind of buy into is that they are at the top of something at any point at all in the military. Like they are never. I mean, General McMaster, General Kelly, General Mattis are not at the top of something. They are still underneath something. You know, so these, like, so like, it just never ends. So at some point you realize, like, I'm getting older, and time is ticking, and like, how long do I want to defer this thing that I want for this thing that might be, you know, or that maybe is more likely never.
You know, it's funny you said that too, because, you know, everybody says, you know, I got to go get more education so I can start my business. Mm-hmm. But then it gets to a point where, well, when are you going to start your business? Yeah. If you're going to spend all this time and money to go get an MBA and more certificates. Yeah. But when? I'm kind of glad you said that. Thank you. That was.
Yeah, no problem. And if I could just dovetail on that for one extra second, is to say, again, you end up just not having time. Like if you want to do this, then that, then this, then that, forget it. It's got to be things that serve multiple purposes at once. Like it cannot be, I'm going to do this and then I'll be able to do that. Like that just never happens. Did you have a question, sir?
No.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah, great question. You know, it's like a daily sort of thing. I'm in an executive PhD program, which is still a little bit of a newer thing. It's especially necessary in the medical profession because a lot of the PhDs that are out there at this point are so hard sciencey as to be in many ways divorced from clinical experience. And so there is now a thing, I'm actually not in a PhD program. I've lied to you today, I'm sorry. I'm in a DSc, a Doctorate of Science with full dissertation. So it's identical to a PhD without having to follow the sort of conventional PhD sequence of events. Like I don't have to be a graduate teacher. I don't have to be on campus. We have a campus, it's in Provo. So I go to Provo, I'm going there next week. So I have to go to Provo a few times a year for on-site intensives. And then the rest of it is group projects remotely and online stuff and postings like that. So that is, and it is a vehicle, right? So if you wondered like, well, wouldn't it be more rigorous to go to a full up hard sciencey in residence PhD program? I'm sure it would. It'd also be impossible for me. So again, multiple sort of converging goals. Like if I can do that, if doing the PhD can provide a vehicle for structure to produce work products, if involvement in the same program lets me have a different option if this specialty thing I'm involved in doesn't work out, if it allows me to stay at home with my wife, you know, and like have a regular life then that's important. So the way I manage it is just by being careful about which one I pick. I guess that's the simplest way I could tell you.
So is it like a 5-year program or?
3 years didactic, which is standard for most PhD programs, and then how long your dissertation takes, I don't know, depends. They really want you to finish up quick because the folks that are ABD, all but dissertation, there's about a 50% dropout rate in PhDs. So they really want you to keep the momentum going. You don't want to get too far from your didactic curriculum because people tend to just sort of lose steam. So I'm hoping for a total of 4 to 5. I'd be really happy at 4. I think I can do it in 4.
Which university is that?
Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions.
Can you share with us the worst mistake you ever made as a business owner?
Oh yeah, not paying taxes. That's a big mistake. Yeah. That's an easy one. Yeah. Well, it wasn't because I didn't know they existed or anything, or I thought I was going to get away with it. It was because I just didn't. Again, I told you as a as a caveat to the rest of my comments, like I did not want to do all the administrative overhead of being a business owner, but like I had to, and so I got some of it wrong, and I ended up owing like 16 grand in taxes, 1 year. So I pay a guy now. So I pay a CPA to keep me on track. Yeah, I have to outsource that one. Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot for me. It was a lot, sir.
So this is more of a comment, Jared. So I kind of heard you. Obviously, we know each other pretty well. So I'm like, I know a fair amount of your story. But something I thought it was interesting as you talked today was, you seem to have the ability to kind of look down the road from where you are and recognize where a potential shift may come. And so, like the examples I hear are, just the lifestyle stuff with, in comparison with your business partner, understanding like I can't maintain this pace of how we eat, how we go throughout the day. It's going to run me down. Then, the PhD, like this gives me a secondary thing if this specialty situation doesn't work. And then going back to, being a leader and knowing like that track, from what I can tell, is going to lead to a certain lifestyle that I don't want, and then being able to take the next step. And what I want to bring up to everybody about that is just being an entrepreneur as you plan, because there is execution, but there's also you going slow enough to follow out a logical path. Like seeing the logical progression of the track you're on and whether or not you want to keep going, and being humble enough to recognize when you might have to shift and move things around in order to maintain the total picture of your life. And I think those 3 things, and I mean, and you see Jared just kind of rattling it off, so he can go down the road, and it's not like a paralysis by analysis thing. It's more of a, okay, I forecast and see that this is going to produce this kind of lifestyle. Is that what I want? Okay, no, make a shift.
Yeah, I mean, what do we talk about in the military? Backwards planning process. And like, and the hottest thing in teaching right now is backwards design. It's literally called backwards design. And the thing you do in all rehab, in all health and fitness, is you project what the 60-year-old version of that person is going to be like, or the 70-year-old or 80-year-old version is going to be like, and you make sure that anything you're doing with them gets them down to that goal. So to me, it's I won't even credit. I mean, I'll credit like that. Virtually every professional thing I've done since graduating from college has been a repeated message of think of the end first. So like you said, it's not. But weirdly, and just to dig a little deeper on a comment you made in there, weirdly, that's not how everybody does it. And I'm only saying weirdly, not as a judgy thing, but because like I just haven't grown up different. But in teaching, like I said, it's actually a big thing now to do this backwards design. To start with like what you want the students to do, and then create a course that like makes that happen by a certain time. Like that's newer. Isn't that weird? That shouldn't be new, but it is. The Socratic method, I think, was the old one where you just like, I'm going to lead them to this point, and then this point, and then this point, and then suddenly they'll look around and be like, wow, I'm at the top of the mountain. But that's crap. because everything depended on you. So again, I guess it goes back to me just being, picky. Like I don't want everyone dependent on me, really. Maybe it's just insecurity, I don't know. But we function better as a collective than as individuals. So yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know if this has been a great talk for entrepreneurs, honestly, because like for me, it's almost, maybe it is, but I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek about it. But I guess maybe realizing your own limits is the most valuable thing going into any sort of self-started.
How are you guys collaborating then within Tacoma or the greater Tacoma area with other professionals? We all have a timeline. Eventually. We're gonna succession planning.
Yeah, so let me talk about succession planning as like a separate, because that is like my nightmare, because that is not happening. So there's no plan of succession. Like it's just like, if I'm taking your meaning correctly, I don't know what happens next. As far as I can tell, it's just me and Ryan doing what me and Ryan do until one of us kicks the bucket. Yeah. So, succession planning is like something I worry about a lot. I've done a de facto succession plan by not being available all the time. And so, I got to go away for a month out of the year to do reserve duty. I'm going to take a vacation somewhere because the reserve duty isn't exactly a vacation, although Hawaii makes it hard to know which is which.
Just came off.
Yeah, that's what they're like. You're so tan for being at work, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I made good choices. Don't get mad at me. So sorry, I got kind of involved in this because that is like literally something I think about a lot. But as far as collaborating, you asked about that too. We do a lot of educational stuff. So going back to some of my initial comments about having to educate the patients and the clients, like we're also having to educate the community. And the community is writ large here because it's everyone all over the world. So he's talking to doctors all the time. We try, like part of another thing about research and PhDs, you present at conferences. So we'll be presenting like our results and our model at conferences, and the farther up in a specialty you get, the smaller the community is. So you end up not having to beat the drum that loud, as long as you hit the right beats. So I think that's what we're concerned about. This is a good community for that because Seattle's got a lot of folks that handle problems. Like they've gotten an initial treatment somewhere else in the wide world of less metropolitan areas, more rural, and then maybe it doesn't work. And who cleans up the mess? Well, it's going to be some specialist probably up in Seattle. So nodes of influence are important, just to generalize a little bit, like knowing we're going to be somebody's backup plan. And that's our business model. Like someone might want to amputate, but then they might be like, I don't know if I want to amputate. What else can I do? Oh, there's these guys in Gig Harbor that do this thing. Maybe you should see them. Because that's not a doctor admitting defeat. That's a doctor saying, I've done everything I can, but I also have a plan for you. I also have, so I'm offering, it's not me, but I'm offering you something that is also a solution. So sort of knowing like strategically who to educate most. And then one thing that's interesting, we haven't gotten into it, but just since you brought it up, if you don't mind if I kind of go off book here, has been the way to do it social media. Our parent company, Hanger, is fairly, it's a polite way to say this, they're pretty sleepy about advertising us. Like they're just sort of like, it's just sort of like, oh, there's this thing. And now on to these other things that we do. And I would say greater than 90% of our clients are word of mouth. And that funds a 20,000 square foot facility and 2 professionals and 3 front and back office staff and 5 techs and lots of high-end equipment and et cetera. So like, it's a powerful intervention. The word of mouth can work, but watching it emerge mostly from social media has been weird. It's been simultaneously invigorating and a little scary. So I don't know how that ties into all this conversation, but maybe one way to tie it in, I'm thinking out loud, one way to tie it in would be in the same way that I would prefer us to have somewhat of a system or a community of practice rather than being gurus on the mountaintop. That is essentially how advertising has gone too. Like we have so many people that are, so many younger folks especially, that are into posting their, latest physical accomplishments on social media, that we do not edit but administer this Facebook site, this Facebook group, where all these people get together, and then there's overlapping groups of different pathologies that we normally see, so different injuries that often result in seeing people like us. And those groups talk to these other groups, and these other groups. So there's these overlapping Venn diagram of, the fibular hemimyelia group, and the cerebral palsy group, and the clubfoot group, and the end-stage ankle arthritis group. And should I get a ankle replacement? That's a thing now. Is it a good thing yet? Group. And we all have like a little finger in each one of those, but it's all informal. I mean, it's formal in that we are purposely, we know we can help those folks, but it's growing on its own. It is not closely directed. So that's just a phenomenon I'm watching. I don't have a lot of analytical or witty or valuable comments for you about it. I just thought I'd mention it, is that it's something that you can leverage if you have a powerful enough product or service to sell or to offer. If you can get that right, like I said, we're funding several people's lives in a big facility just based on 90% word of mouth, which is a little nutty. But hangers so darn big that we're just a drop in their bucket. They've got a big bucket. They control about something like over 95% of the prosthetics market in the United States. So we're like it's big potatoes to us, but small potatoes to them. Anything else, guys?
What's your end game?
My end game? To hang out in the hot tub every night with my wife. Maybe to have kids someday. To be a healthy and fit 70-year-old. Like as far as financially, the things I'm doing to help facilitate those comfort items down the line are, having a job that has a pretty high, income and to time invested sort of quotient. And that's true of teaching too, I think. There's a lot of time spent in teaching, but when you're done teaching, you're done teaching, you go home. I'm in one of the very few niches where I can get a pension, so I'm continuing this reserve stuff so that there's a pension for me someday, money falling out of the sky into my bank account every day or every month. Trying to do all the things now that keep my body healthy, even though I don't sound like it here, to keep my body healthy. I just turned 40, and so I'm kind of turning that corner of the 40s are hard, and I hear the 50s are easier, but only because you just give up. My friend who's 50 was like, oh yeah, 50 is easier. And I'm like, why? And because you just accept it. You just accept all the crap that you're fighting against when you're in your 40s. So maybe that's true. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if that answers your question. Like, I don't have a business end game. I have a lifestyle end game.
Yeah, and it's I'm kind of glad. I've always enjoyed your topic because you're pretty raw and real, and you don't have this, I'm doing this, and we have all the analysts, we analyze this, and this is what we're going to do. And what we try to instill in the students in the BI program is like, business is not linear. You can't think of it this way. Your ebbs and flows. And always trying to tell people, and you mentioned the side hustle, you're hustling a little bit over it, and doing this and that. 30 to 35% of the U.S. economy right now is a gig economy. Somebody always has a side job. So within the next couple of years, it's going to be 45%. So I always tell people, you better have a side gig, because if you don't, you're not going to make a living here. And it's okay, to have good cash flow, but it's also okay to have a side gig where you can make $30,000, $40,000 additional to your current income. And I'm kind of glad you're saying that, because I think what the education system is doing right now is like, okay, go get your undergraduate. If you can't find a job, come back and get your MBA. Spend another $60,000. You can't get a job with your MBA, come back and get a PhD. And then you can really get a job.
Oh yeah, that is a business.
Yeah,
That is a business model for educational dollars. The only thing I'd offer there, Tom, is maybe one thing I didn't represent well enough is that this is like a newer version of me. I've been working towards this outlook that you're hearing me present today, but there was a decade there where I was more just like get on the train, run as fast as you can, get on the treadmill. Shouldn't have said train. Get on the treadmill, run as fast as you can until you can't run anymore. I mean, I did that for a while. So it may be true that there needs to be a crucible period, a period of, and I don't know, I only have my one experience, but at least in life, it may be true that before you can kind of approach it from this, kind of like vertically integrated, multi-angle sort of thing, you've got to just like run hard at one thing and like give up everything else and just run straight at something. And I don't know, probably you just need to like have a bunch of little rules and caveats built into that run straight at the wall plan. But there's probably some value into just like running straight at something. One thing I've noticed in my patients anyway, the folks that have had either congenital, not even the congenital ones, more so the folks that have been very, very sedentary after a very, very hard injury. So it's an amount of sedentariness that you can understand. It is very hard to get going again. It's just like extremely hard. If you have never tried really hard at one thing, sacrificing other things, I don't know if you know how to try hard enough at critical times. Like later, you'd like to be able to try hard strategically at like just at certain inflection points. You don't want to work that hard, but then this inflection point, you recognize it coming up and you're like, push, but just for a little bit so it doesn't like upset the whole apple cart. And I don't know what to tell younger folks. I'll be experimenting with this when I have students, but I think there probably is a time where you do need to just run straight at something. And I don't know how you define how long that should be or when you've learned enough lessons to move on and start to be more holistic, but I do think that's probably necessary, and the military did that for me. School did that for me because I did like a Jesuit thing in my undergrad where I picked the thing I was the worst at and tried to major in it, and that was an extremely tough experience for me. Like I'll get my niece is going through it right now. She's in like a 504 program. She's in like special ed sort of, but where her conventional high school experience is like this, but it's banging your head against a wall and getting nowhere. So I did that for a while in college, and then I ran straight at a wall in the military. I just ran to find my endpoint, and I don't know if I did too much or not. I don't think I did. I definitely did enough. I may have done too much, and so strategically learning how to do that, I think, is also valuable. So I didn't speak to that in the rest of my comments, and I apologize, but I think I'm only here because I did that other thing too.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you were going to first.
Just two questions. Are you trying to grow your business abroad, like other countries?
I am not actively trying. One thing I would like to do, one thing that's like the only real way you can get off of show up, make money, don't show up, don't make money, and still show up, make money. So it's kind of not what I started out having it to be, but is to teach on like a traveling road show. Like a lot of clinicians do this. Like you go out and you have like some packaged method that you go and teach about, and you teach these weekend courses that are highly attended and pretty high yield on income. You just do them a few times a year and kind of pads you. It's your side hustle. So I have looked into that. That's a thing to do. I have a couple of things that I've built up that I can kind of go and do that with friends internationally. We almost went to Turkey, but it turned out to be a bad time to go to Turkey just about a year and a half ago, so we didn't do that. But am I actively doing that right now? No. I'm still trying to make sure I've got my backup plan, my PhD thing going, and then traveling and teaching might be something I try to do more of once that's complete. Sure.
I was gonna say, so Avery, we've kind of talked about to Jared's point about going hard at something. Because I think what happens to people, and I think you have to be careful with it with entrepreneurship, is you have your dream, your idea that you start out with. And I think one of the toughest things for us to do in our society is like hold that with an open hand. And so when we were talking about before, having a football injury and then progressing on to the next phase of life and the acceptance of that was that phase, this is this new phase. And I think, because I resonate with what you said, Jared. High school years, college, military, boom, boom, hard. But you get older and you realize, like, I only got so much of that in the tank now. Mm-hmm. And there's even certain things that I can't put up with anymore. Like when I was in the military, that was my first experience with the outdoors. And so my first experience with the outdoors was just sucking and being cold all the time and, you know, pulling security, being up all night, whatever the case may be. And I've come to the realization that at 35 now, I don't want to go and camp or hike that much. You know, I just don't want to do it because I have a certain connotation with it, right? I treat it a certain way, but I maxed that thing out at some point. And so now it's kind of like those circuits are fried a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that circuit's fried.
They can come back.
It can come back. It's
They probably won't come. You probably won't be climbing right near.
right,
But
right, yeah. I'm not gonna, like playing the dirt.
yeah. Like that was great. Let's go inside.
But it's like being, like, which is why it's good that you ask these questions now, because if you guys can be more strategic about that ahead of time, not that you're gonna have the right answers, all the right answers, but if you can do less beating your head against the wall, it's kind of like not having as traumatic of an injury later on.
So something that kind of like struck me that you guys are both kind of saying was that when you were talking about, you know, dealing with people that are injured that don't know how to do the 100%, right? And that's something that's kind of scared me recently because, not recently, throughout my kind of college experience. Because after my injury in high school, like, because during that time I was going 100%, you know, ball to the wall at it, right? And once I got injured, there wasn't like a time of like, oh, you know, I'll just work out a little bit and I'll just do this. It was just like done.
Yeah, that happens.
You know, and so like I'm kind of stuck in that, and it's really like frustrating for me to like not know if I'll be like have the same 100%. I guess, and that's kind of like.
Well, your 100% could be different.
Right.
An injury.
But it's hard to like look at it like that because I'm like, all right, I'm not giving 100%, even though I might be, if I'm comparing it to my other one. You know, if my 100%, you know, 2 years ago was waking up at whatever time in the morning and just running, you know, or just working out, going back to bed, you know, and just like multiple times, then that was 100%. You know, like it's now my 100% is working till 11. You know, like or I don't, you know, I don't know.
So if it's a different domain, find a mentor.
Yeah.
Because all you'll need, having like found what the outside of your limits feels like of one type of 100% in one domain, you now don't know. I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, but tell me if I'm wrong, because I deal with these with my patients all the time. Like you now kind of don't know what that looks like in any domain. You know, you're making your best guess at this working until 11 thing, but you don't know if this could well be past your limits too, and maybe this is a pattern of not knowing, you know, when to say when. Yeah. And that is a very normal young man thing to have. So if that's the case, then welcome to the other 3 billion of us that are feeling the same way. But I think that the best thing you can do is, well, first of all, like try to choose something that, you know, make a good choice at the next thing you try to go hard at. But definitely find someone that really cares about you as a mentor. I know it's like oh, just find a mentor, no big deal. They're online, you can find them easy. But
Mentor.com.
yeah, sure, it's so easy, so simple. That cares about you too. But if you can find somebody that does that for you, I think the only thing worth throwing 100% into is the thing that you have mentorship. Let me say it that way, because it's too inefficient any other way. Like, there are no new ideas, there are no new stories, nothing is new under the sun. Nothing, zero things. They're just permutations of something that was already there. Someone has already lived your life. There's somebody out there that is your double, right? So, I mean, and I don't know if that's true, but going at it with that attitude is a good operational philosophy, I think, because it will stop you from trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. It's been done. Whatever you want to do, it's been done. The thought has been had. Someone else has done it. What's different, and I can speak to this specifically, is what's different about people that end up rising to the top is not the ideas, it's the execution of those ideas. And so if you're still at the idea phase, if you're still in development, you should not be doing that alone. I don't think. And I don't know if that's I won't extrapolate the products, but just in life and in services anyway, if you're just thinking about doing it, or if you're just dabbling, there is no reason at all to do that alone. That's incredibly inefficient. That's a waste of time. You need to do some guided dabbling for a while. And then that'll help you decide much earlier whether it's worth going harder than that. You know, later, when you may need to, like, when you do have like some original stuff, you know, quote unquote original, because nothing's original, but at least, you know, has passed the news cycle original, then you might want to go it alone. But I wouldn't. I mean, when I was your age, I don't know how old you are, but you look younger than me, so I would not do anything alone. Like, it just, I mean, I did, and it wasn't efficient. So just get mentorship, you know. And then, like I said, if you don't want it bad enough to find a mentor, then don't do it, because it's definitely not worth wasting your time. You only got so many turns around the sun. So.
Based on your experience, what would be a piece of advice you would give to somebody starting a business besides paying taxes?
Yeah, that's important. It's important. Yeah, I like to give the real pearls of wisdom here. Pay your taxes, show up to work. Those are a good thing. Yeah, like, be on time. Well, where I'm at, you're just going to get a flavor of like where I'm at as a person here. But I don't, in rehab anyway, and in the service industry that I'm in, I don't find that it's the person, like I'm not the world's best at what I do at all, but I consider more variables than others. I'm willing to consider a bigger picture. And so my advice to you as an aspiring, you know, entrepreneur would be, the thing that will make you successful is not being better than everyone around you at the thing everyone's already doing. It'll be considering a bigger context than that one narrow focus. You will need to maintain focus to some degree, and how much of a degree depends on what you're getting into. But I guess my biggest thing would be not to lose sight of the context. I think this happens probably I would expect this happens it happens in science a lot. It happens in programming, computer programming, app development a lot. It's so hard to develop a good app that sometimes by the time you're done developing it, it sucks. Like, it's a great app, but it doesn't serve the need, like the niche that it was going to fill isn't there anymore, or something else came up, or so I think you just always need to, I hope that's helpful. That feels pity anyway, so I got pity on you. So if you can like step back and just consider that there's more to it. So with my patients, like, I don't need to be the best physical therapist or trainer at all. I need to be a certain level of really good or of good, and then not ignore the other things that are feeding into their recovery that aren't exactly to do with, you know, strength or joint range of motion or tissue healing or something like that. There's a ton going into these humans that is not that stuff. That is, and if you aren't considering that other stuff, you're going to wonder why the hell they got better or didn't get better, even though you did everything you were supposed to do. So I become a better PT by widening my view instead of trying to find the next magic pill or the next spinal manipulation or joint adjustment or, you know, cardio 5,000 machine. Yeah. Anything else, guys? All right, thanks so much for your time, everybody.